Just a reminder, we do these every month, middle of the month. Tell your colleagues, tell your friends, anyone interested in Tableau content that we are doing these sessions. I think this year will be really exciting, especially with what's coming with the Tableau platform. So we'll have a lot of good content to share as Tableau is developing newer features in the product. So just a reminder, and again, every session is on YouTube, as you know. We also have on our YouTube channel, just a quick like reference. We also do tips and tricks videos and other content, so not just the sessions. So good material there. Your host today, I should say your main contact, the main speaker today is Lauren. I'll be here to MC, but Lauren has had a ton of experience in Tableau, works multitude of projects, and she's led Lauren what the last 4 or 5 sessions, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Has it been that many? Wow.
I know time does fly. It's already in February. All right, so today's session again is Tableau, advanced Tableau mapping. All right. At the end, we will have a Q&A, as we always do. We'll try to leave 5, 10 minutes for Q&A. If anyone has questions following the session, feel free to reach out to us if something didn't get answered on today's webinar. And just a reminder, this is a Zoom meeting. I have, for the last handful of sessions, allowed people to come off of mute. So if you want to engage, if you want to come off of mute and ask questions, please feel free to. Otherwise, you can use the chat window. That's totally fine. And if you're not talking, if you could stay on mute, that would be helpful for Lauren and myself. But if you have a question, you could definitely come off of mute. We're more than welcome to take questions that way, or the chat window, which I will be monitoring. Lauren, do you want to tell the folks here? Most folks know you, but just a little bit about your background so that they have an idea of your experience in Tableau.
Yeah, so I'm Lauren Cristaldi. I've been with CEO for 2.5 years now. I have about 7 years of experience with Tableau and analytics. I come from a state government background, so I used to work for the state of South Carolina using Tableau and everything else.
Cool. Lauren's very big in design. She has a really great eye, artistic eye for Tableau. So there have been some past sessions on design that I'm sure will be more. And Lauren, I think you also entered into the Iron Viz contest recently for Tableau, if I'm
Yeah,
mistaken.
last year. I
Yeah.
like to participate in the other community events too. So if Iron Viz is too daunting, I like to do like Iron Quest is a monthly one
Yeah.
and Makeover Monday or Workout Wednesday. Highly recommend those.
Yeah, they're good practice. Really good practice. You're right. All right, let's get into it. I don't like to bore people with slides, although your intro is very important, Lauren. But let's get into the topic today, advanced Tableau mapping. Lauren, what are you going to cover at a high level so that the folks on the call know what we're going to get into?
So today we're going to go through some of like the base features of mapping. So we'll start out with like your standard maps and then we'll get into like some of the new version updates and everything. So using like spatial files and shape files and even creating things that aren't maps with map layers, which is really
Okay.
exciting.
Okay. Well, I'm going to give you plenty of time. Um, Live demo. I'll flip it to you, Lauren, if you're ready.
Yeah, sounds good.
Cool.
Thank you.
You are welcome. And again, yes, Lauren's getting set up here. If you have any questions, ask them in the chat, come off of mute, and yeah, let's get into it.
Sweet. So yeah, just to start out, these are some of the different types of maps that we're going to cover today. We have our spatial files, how we're going to connect them. I'm primarily going to be using like census shape files. And I'm going to share this workbook, or I'm going to publish it on the Zio Tableau Public after this. So I'll have some links to where you can find those shape files if you want to use them. Yeah, we're going to concentrate on like core-based statistical areas. And then I have another one that's the DMAs as well. So we'll kind of go through what those mean and how you can use them. Then I think we've all probably seen a lot of these hex bins. I'm not going to go through exactly how to create them from scratch because I found a better solution. So you're not having to recreate the wheel. And that data set will also be available. So you can just plug in your actual data to this spatial file. Then we'll get into like some spatial calcs. Especially like the lines are really cool if you have any data that you want to connect one point to the other, maybe like shipping routes or flights or anything like that. And then combining those with the spatial files as well. So you can see like from a high level, oh, this is coming from the Cincinnati CBSA and going into Illinois. And my favorite part, and last week I gave a presentation on this, but I'm going to get into more detail today, using map layers to create not just maps. So the mapping in Tableau is also drawing in Tableau, which is kind of cool. So yeah, we can dive into the first. So let's start out with a standard map. I'm just using Superstore, but if you have any data that has geographic references, even if you don't have latitude and longitude, you can just have like the region. If your data comes in and it's not geographic, but you need it to be, you can go over here and change that data type so that it has that geographic reference, depending on your field, which is a good thing to call out. So let's just bring out state and province. And I think, okay, yeah, we're good. So we have this unknown down here. And we actually want to select that so that we can edit the locations. In this case, it's getting confused because we have Canada and the US mixed together. So when this error comes up, it's good to go in, edit locations. We'll do this drop down. Right now it's fixed to the United States, but we actually want it to reference a field. So if you have several countries, or say you have a lot of counties and you need to reference the state that those counties are in, then you would come here and you'd say from field. And now when we hit OK, that indicator goes away and we've mapped out all of our regions, or yeah, regions in Canada as well. So let's say I just want to focus on the US. If we bring countries to filter, let's just do the US. And in the Superstore data, we don't have any Alaska or Hawaii. But sometimes, you bring in and you do have Alaska and Hawaii, and then you realize, wow, Alaska is really big. And it looks almost like as big as the entire continental United States. So that's where filters are handy too. I like to make two versions of the same map, just duplicating the same sheet. And then I'll have one that's just Alaska, one that's just the continental US, and then duplicate the sheet again if you want Hawaii or Puerto Rico. And then we bring those all in together in the dashboard. And then you kind of have like the common maps that you see, where you have Alaska and Hawaii kind of in the bottom left, so that our scale it's more scaled, so you get a better view of everything instead of it all being zoomed out. So the default automatic for this is just that circle. But if we go down and change our mark type to map, now we have those states filled out. So this is just our basic map. In older versions of Tableau, if you wanted to put a layer on there for, let's say, I want to see some circles to show like the different categories or something to do with the orders, you'd have to make that dual axis in order to do that. But with the map layers, which has been around for a little while now, but sometimes it's fun to think about all the hacks you had to go through, and then they do updates and it's a lot easier now, which is nice. So if we want to bring in sales, we need to add a layer that has a geographic reference again. So we could use the same one, or we could, take it down to like the city. City will need those other references so that it maps correctly. One thing to call out here is you'll see this hierarchy. So this helps just kind of bring all of those together, and then you can just drill down. So if I just brought in state, then I could drill down to the city or the zip code. So it's nice to have those so that it knows the hierarchy in which those regions are connected, or those fields that are geographic fields are connected. So now we have these circles, and we could change, let's see, we could do like size and then also color for sales. And based on the scale and the size, at a glance, you can see which areas or which cities have the largest sales value overall compared to the other cities. So yeah, that's just our basic map. Now, I guess, are there any questions before I move on to the next part of this?
Let me check. No, no questions, at least in the chat.
Awesome. Cool. Okay, so next, let's get into using these spatial files, which is really cool. So say you have a custom geographic region, like a CBSA, that when you go over here, like if we go back to our standard map and we do that drop down for changing the field type and the geographic role, technically CBSA and MSA already exist in here, but say they didn't exist, well, how do we draw those shapes for those geographic regions? Say you have like a special, like school districts is a good example. So I want to just show the shape of the school districts on the map. Then that's where a spatial file can come in and already have those polygons like pre-computed basically. And then it's always a zip file. So you'll download that zip, then you literally just connect to the zip. So you'd go to like add connection up here. And so you'd add that new data source and you just select that zip file that you want it to reference. So that's pretty straightforward. Another option though, if let's say you don't have a spatial file, then if we go to, there it is. If you just want to create a custom geofield, so in this example, I'm going to use those DMAs, which are designated market areas. And DMAs don't exist as an option in that geographic role. Then I can go up to the DMA name or the code. And I would change that type to a geographic role, and we'd say create from. And as long as you have another geographic field like zip code, really zip code is the best because if you use county, it could get kind of funky. The zip codes are granular enough that it's going to more accurately draw those DMAs or the custom geographic shapes. So if we hit zip code, now it automatically creates this hierarchy. And when I bring out DMA and I change that mark to a map, now we have all of these DMAs drawn across state borders and everything using those zip codes, which is pretty cool. And I think that is a very new feature. So that's nice if you don't, because I know spatial files can be kind of difficult to find. sometimes. So, and then maybe you don't want to have to connect your data to that spatial file as well. This is a good option because you can just use the data that you have as long as you have a geographic field that already exists and create that custom geocoded field.
Lauren, there was a question. Can I guess, can the spatial file be used without having geographic details? If I'm reading that correctly. Um, yeah, can the spatial
So,
file be used without having geographic details?
so I guess, I mean, it can be used like the spatial file, it like inherently has geographic details, but do you mean like the data that you're connecting to it doesn't have any geographical details?
Yeah, Anushka, I don't know if you want to clarify, or we can take it offline. Either way. Yeah, why don't we'll come back to that question, Lauren. Keep going.
Okay. Yeah, and I think I might be able to explain it better. I'll show how I have the data sources connected after we connect these two. So in this example, we're going to connect two spatial files. So we want to combine them. So say I have a layer that's our CBSAs, and then I have another layer that's our MSAs. And I want to see, oh, well, which MSAs fall into which CBSAs. So this is where we can map both of those together by bringing out the geometry field, which is always baked in to your spatial file zip. So it just basically, it tells Tableau how to draw those polygons. And if we go up here to edit data source, I can kind of show you how that join is working. So here, if we open this up, I'm just telling it the geometry field from this file, the CBSAs, and I'm doing a left join because I want to show all CBSAs regardless if they have a metro, like a metro area within them. And that's where we put this intersects instead of equals or like your normal join logic, this is really cool that you can do this. Intersects basically is asking, okay, within these polygons, is there anything that overlaps within the same space? So it's taking a collection of all the points that exist in that polygon from this geometry field and comparing it against the geometry field of that's drawing the polygon in the other data set. So that's how you would connect the two spatial files. If you want to just see things that you only want a map that shows both of the, like you want to see, okay, I only want to see CBSAs that also have MSAs, then we would change this to an inner join. And now if I go back to that map I was just showing, now it's only displaying those CBSAs with MSAs. Another thing with this, if you have data, let's say like in our first map where we don't have Alaska and Hawaii data, I like to use this like scaffold. It's basically a scaffold where it's just a standard list of all the states in the United States, and we connect it. In this case, we're connecting that CBSA to the CBSA name that I have in my states list. But let's say you just wanted to connect it with your existing data. You can actually, so you can add it as a layer and not have to connect them. Sometimes that's better, especially if you have a large data set. And I can actually show that. So if I go up to data, we'll add a new data source. And I'll just go into my US states list, bring that out. We'll go back to this map. Now, even though these aren't connected, they're both being drawn on the same map. So if I just bring out a state name and add it to the marks layer, now we have every state. So you can see, oh, I may not have data for Alaska, but Alaska exists. And it kind of helps you pinpoint like, oh, maybe I should be paying more attention to this state that's not like I don't have any data for that state, but maybe I want to like it's an emerging market or something like that. This is also nice if you don't like the standard like out of the box view and you want more of a custom background without having to load any like custom images or anything. I'm going to change this to a map. I'll move this all the way down to the bottom because depending on your layer order, that's how close to the top it is. So when that was back on the top, I wouldn't be able to see the tooltips for any of these circles that we have for the sales. So for the state, yeah, so we have all our states out here. Now if I go to background layers, I'm just going to remove all of these background layers. So we have more of this like customized map and you can change the color and you don't lose any of the different states, even if you don't have the data in it. So it's still that same scale. And also this is where we could, filter by the state name, take out Alaska. And Hawaii. We can leave Puerto Rico down there for now. And we would just duplicate, we go back up here. We only want Alaska. And in this case, we don't have, so the filters, which is also good to note, the filters for when you're just layering and you don't actually have those two data sources blended or connected. This filter is not going to work on these other layers. And you can tell by if it's grayed out or not. Because that can get confusing if you're applying a filter and you're like, why isn't it applying to the whole sheet? Yeah, that's just one of those funky things to remember. So we'd actually have to go up here to this field. And we'd say like Alaska, because maybe this will be a part of the data later. So now we have Alaska in its own area. And if we create a dashboard, bring out a container. We can bring in our standard continental map plus Puerto Rico. And we'll bring out Alaska. We just hide that title. And we can play with the sizing and whatnot. Then if you had another one for Hawaii over here, we'd have that view of like, here's this little zoomed in area over here, like within this little box. That would be like, oh, Alaska's being included, but we're not losing the level of zoom that we have with the continental US that we normally would have. And usually I'm against floating, but sometimes it is easier to adjust, especially in cases like this where we're just kind of demoing. Move that over. We'll bring this guy to the front. Yeah, now it's really looking like some of those common maps you'll see online sometimes. And I think visually this is a lot more appealing, especially if you're doing like a high level executive dashboard or something and you just want to show like you really want to highlight the sales per city, like in this case, then you want it to be this level of zoomed in to the places we care about and still not lose any of the other states that may not be a part of the continental US. Plus, without those background layers, you're not, you're only seeing the US. You're not seeing part of Mexico. You're not seeing part of Canada. If you're in Europe, I'm sure it would get even crazier because there's a lot more countries bordering you potentially. So it kind of cuts down that noise of the other default backgrounds. So going back to our spatial files, we went through connecting those spatial files together, but now, and I'll get to the hex ones as well. But in this view, we have that spatial file and real data. So we go to edit this data source. And now I think I understand the question a little better. So you do need a geographic field that connects to the spatial file in some way. So let's say, like this is CBSAs. So we would need something that would also have something in common with that spatial file. So I'm just using my states list that I made that has CBSAs already. That way I can, let's say like my base data has state level geographic detail, but it doesn't have CBSA. I can just connect, I just create a relationship between those CBSAs. My custom state file will say the name equals the CBSA name. And then the end of that relationship, river, if you will, would be that state name connected to one of the state names from my actual data. So yeah, you do need at least one geographic field or data point so that you can relate it back to that spatial file. So that's how we're connecting our actual data with a spatial file. But to get into drawing like these lines, or let's say like you hover over here and you'll notice I have the size. Well, that's not included in the file. It's actually a calculation. And we can, let's build that out real fast. So what's important to note is if you want to draw a line, you need to have a start or like an origin, a point of origin, and then a point for the destination. To make those points, you can't use the generated latitude and longitude. You have to actually have latitude and longitude in your data set already that's mapped, per row. Let's say you don't, like, and I found like it's not very common for data sets, at least that I've seen to have the latitude and longitude. So there's a really good tool that I use a lot. It's called Geocodio. And every month you get like a free so many rows. And then it's like very, very inexpensive. I think the other day I loaded 10,000, or no, it was 500,000 rows and it only cost like 75 cents or something. But basically what it does is if you have, let's say, city and state, but you don't have latitude and longitude, you can use Geocodio to upload your cities and states. And as long as it's in the US or Canada, it'll find the exact latitude and longitude for that city. So on that level. But yeah, you have to have latitude and longitude in order to do a lot of these spatial calcs. So I have my end latitude and my start latitude and the longitudes. Then I would make this calculated field. If we edit this, we use make point. If we expand this, there's actually a whole section for just the spatial calcs. So what make point is doing is it's making a point out of that start latitude and longitude. So we get a precise like location to start from. So that's how we create that point of origin. And then we would do the same thing for our destination. It would just be that end latitude and longitude. So let's bring out those points. Okay, I'm going to just change the color so it stands out. And then we'll add our origin. A lot of times they overlap, but that's because we need another level of detail. So in here, I just have some order IDs. If we bring that to detail and do the same for the other one. Then the next step after we've made our points of origin and the destination, we'd go and create the line. So it's literally make line, and we'd use that shipping origin, shipping destination. That way Tableau knows which point to start with to draw the line and which point to actually draw the line to. And if we just look at the make line, yeah, just the start and the end points that you want. So we'll bring that out as a map layer or mark layer. And again, we need that order ID or whatever level of granularity you want to add in there, just so that those lines we can differentiate, because right now they just are crazy and it's like a spider web. So I'll bring out that order ID to detail. And now we can see the individual lines. We can also add in for the tooltip where it's coming from and where it's going to. Oh, sorry, I used the wrong field. So don't use the points for that. You would actually use like the state it started in or other location reference for where it started. And then the state it ended in. So yeah, now we know that it's going from Washington to Wisconsin for this particular order. Then if we only want to see, like, let's say we want to start filtering. So if we bring out, like, I want to see where depending on the state where things are starting, and then everywhere that it's ending. So let's do Colorado. So yeah, we can see that Colorado is, in this case, shipping to Georgia, South Carolina, and North Carolina, and not the other states. Another cool feature, or another cool spatial calc, especially if you're looking at like logistics and transportation and whatnot, we could use distance. So distance is using those points that we made to create the line, and it's calculating how many miles or kilometers or meters there are between those 2 points. So if we take that distance and we put it on our route in detail, now we can see in miles how far this point in Colorado is to, let's say, this point in South Carolina. And if we go back to one of our CBSA ones, so like here where we have size of the CBSA, so it's actually able to calculate the total area of that polygon. And to do that, we look at this CBSA size, and it's just taking the area of that geometry field that was in our spatial file, and I'm saying just in miles. And so now we can see the square miles of the total area of that CBSA, which also might be relevant depending on what you're looking to get out of like these maps. It's just good to know all of the different options. So any questions? And then I'll get into hex bins and that gauge.
Yeah, Xavier, do you want to elaborate on your question that you had?
Absolutely. So my thinking is we have these things kind of set the areas on the map by zip code. In theory, it would be possible for us to group some of the zip codes together. Let's say I'm running an enterprise and I have different markets that I'm trying to manage, and I have all the zip codes for each market. I'm trying to see how they're doing at scale, but also scale within the map. I could assign those zip codes by the market to kind of have that be, as it gets a kind of a part of the overall granularity.
Yeah, no, you can make a custom geo field. So say like one of your other dimensions, you could just drop it down. As long as you have those zip codes assigned on a row level, then you can draw all kinds of custom area borders and outlines. And that's a really good use case. And you don't even have to download a spatial file, which is even nicer. You can just use the data you have.
Yeah, that's super.
Good question.
Yeah, good question.
I think we're good, Lauren. Yeah, let's keep rolling. We have about 15 minutes or so.
Okay,
Yeah.
sweet. So hex bins. I think data guide needs to chill. Okay. So usually, I mean, I've seen a few different ways that people have done this. You know, there's a calculation that you can create, and if you have latitude and longitude, where is that one? Yeah, hexbiny or hexbinx. So it needs like the x and y coordinate, in which case like the latitude and longitude, but it doesn't have to be latitude and longitude. And it creates, it basically is creating, it gets confusing though, because then you have all these calculations and you have to make sure that you put them in the right order. And then a lot of times the buffer, like the radius around it, like right now we have everything perfectly buffered. You have to play with it and adjust it a lot. It doesn't automatically scale when you bring this sheet into a dashboard and you want it to be smaller or bigger. So I think overall, this is just a lot easier. If we go to the data source, it's something I found on Public. I love Tableau because you can just go to Public and the community is awesome. They'll let you download stuff. I always make all my dashboards downloadable, trying to pay it forward because I know when I was starting out, that's how I learned everything was just downloading workbooks and trying to figure out what was going on in them. So yeah, here I just have this, I took some population data from the census. I connected on state so that I could have some actual data. And this extract it was just a Tableau data source that already had all of the US states and then the geometry. So it's a spatial file, but it was already packaged, so I didn't have to download the zip and everything like that. But technically this is using a spatial file. So this way all of our shapes are already pre-computed and now it's drawn out. So we get all these cool hex bends. And I like these and I wish they were used more. I know it can be kind of confusing because your brain is looking for that traditional map of the US. But here, everything it's just all states created equal because it's all laid out. The Northeast can get kind of crazy because you want to see like New Jersey or Delaware is a good one where it's always getting cut off because it's so much smaller than the states around it. And same with, like Alaska is massive and it starts to mess with the scale of the overall map when we have all of those in the view. So I just think this is nice if you just want to see kind of like a heat map look at all of the states. Now we can see who has the largest population. Not surprised it's California. And we could adjust this with other data as well, as long as you connect those and you have a geographic field that exists in both. In this case, you would need, see, what does that have out of the box? Yeah, in this case, we just have state available for that hex bin. But it's okay if your data, as long as your data has state, you can use this to just create those hex bins really easily and just create that relationship between your actual data and this spatial file that's already packaged. So now, okay, I think we're good there. I want to make sure that I do a quick run through for these gauges. So like a couple months ago, or maybe a month ago, I'd seen a lot of things on Public and other blogs and whatnot about, creating gauges, and it all just seemed a little too involved, honestly. And a lot of times people so we'd have this gauge, but it would actually be an image behind your actual data, or you could only control these different target slices by parameters. And I was like, well, if we can use parameters, why can't we have fixed calcs in the place of parameters that are using actual data so that our targets are adjustable depending on the region or the quarter or any other levels of detail that you'd want incorporated into those target values. So for that, and I actually made a better version of the one that I have on my Tableau Public because this is just some Superstore data that I had just preloaded. So you can connect any data you want here in place of this sheet one. And we're doing scaffolding. So with scaffolding, we bring in these two placeholders. They just have this basically almost like the spatial file where it's giving a lot of different points to map to. It's just not packaged the same way. So like in the general placeholder, we have point radius. So we map all of these by using this 1 = 1 in the scaffold. And to do that, those fields don't actually exist in either data sets. But if you go to the relationship calculation and you just put 1, and we have 1 equals 1, your scaffold is ready to go. So by saying 1 equals 1, we are assigning every single row in this table to every single row in our main table. And because we're using relationships, they're loading independent of each other, and it's a lot more performant. Because I know that sounds like, oh wow, your data is going to explode, it's going to be crazy, but that would happen if we did, traditional joins like what was available a long time ago. But thankfully, with relationships, scaffolding is a lot more performant than it used to be. So if I come here, I think I can do this in 5 minutes. Let's see. So to start off our gauge, we need, let's see. Okay, so we're going to take out this collect dial. You'll notice that these are actually geographic fields, but they're not how you would think of geographic fields. Like, so this make point, that spatial calc that we used earlier with the latitude and longitude, in this case, it's using like XY coordinates in place of any kind of typical geographic field that we would think of. So this is using dial radius, dial degrees, which we can look into. Dial radius is just referring back to that gauge model data that I was showing. So those different values. And the degrees is using so it's using those values that are in the model, but it's also referring how we make it relate and adjust accordingly to our data, our actual data. We use this depth calculation, which I know looks kind of scary, but feel free to download this and just, you never even have to open the calcs if you don't want to. Just replace all these. So if you do want to download this and make your own gauge using my calculations, if you just replace like target 1, target 2, like these fields with your actual data, and I think all of these are calculated fields and they're just referring to sales. So really all you'd have to do is go to whatever field you want to replace sales with, and it would use that instead. So if you had cost or quantity, then you just change it, and then all these targets would update. So if we bring out the dial, so we can see it starting to take shape, but we don't want it to be a map, even though we're using those mark layers. We want it to be a polygon. And right now it doesn't know, it needs a level and then it needs the value. So value is going to be put into path. We don't want it to be aggregated, so we're just going to make it dimension. Still looking funky. That's why we need level. We'll put that on color. And now it's drawn the way that we expect. Before I do the ticks, I'll do the gauge. So for the gauge, we need the one that says gauge. Yeah, here we go. And all of these are working in a similar way to this dial calculation. So we'll bring that out. We actually want this one to be a line. Then we use point on detail, but we don't want it to be aggregated. And that's cool because it looks like that needle. But if we really want it to have that needle shape, we actually need to bring point size to the size of the line, and it'll give us that like needle look. And this is kind of a cool calc because you can adjust it. So depending on how thick or thin you want that needle, we can adjust these points. And you could even replace these with parameters and then adjust it on the fly. That didn't do very much, I think, because it's starting at 10. This got a little bit skinnier. Then if I want, let's see, the tick labels. So for those tick labels, like you'd see like on, like in your car on the speedometer, we'll come up to here. We'll use another geographic field, bring that up. We'll create a line. And this one, you really gotta be committed to it to the end because it looks really weird the more stuff you put out there until everything you need is out there. So with those ticks, we need the tick degree. We'll put that on detail. Make it a dimension, a continuous dimension. Then we take value, put that on detail as well. Oh, sorry, put that on path. Make that a dimension. And it's funny that it went from that crazy chaotic line to these perfectly lined up tick marks, but the magic of map layers at work. Now, if we want labels, just one last thing, so I know we only have about 5 minutes left. So our tick labels are going to refer back to like the same geographic field, just slightly, it's slightly different because we want it to adjust and like not overlap those tick marks. So we're going to find, let's see. Yeah, tick labels, add that layer, change this to text. And we need the point on detail. Make that a dimension. Now all of those are lining up. And then I made just some label metrics that are already formatted. So now we have all of these labeled. It does get kind of weird with that halo. So to remove that, you just go up to color and then none instead of automatic, and they'll get rid of those. And there's some other layers we can add on to this, but maybe I can, in a future session, we can get deeper into how to create these gauges and how to make them more customizable. So yeah, I know we only have like 3 minutes left. Any questions?
That was really cool, Lauren.
Yeah, I love gauges.
Yeah.
Took me forever to figure that out. And once I did, it was just like the best.
Well, we can maybe have a continued session on that, knowing that it's a bit more complicated.
Yeah, for sure.
Cool. We have a few minutes. We could definitely take questions. Again, feel free to reach out offline if we can't get to it. But yes, any questions from the group?
with the hexagon map, it's works similarly as far as grouping. So in theory, one could group some of the maps together, some of the states together.
So with the hexagon, because it's coming from that pre-computed file for those shapes, you couldn't group them together like you could like over here. You don't have that flexibility as much. I mean, you could add a layer and then it would try to do that. But that would be interesting to try. I think when you're drawing custom shapes, it's better just to use like a basic map.
Good question. All right. Well, I think that takes us right to time. Lauren, great session. We'll have it posted, recording sent out, and I think you'll have these examples on Tableau Public, if I'm
Yeah.
right.
So this is Anu. I have a question before we wrap up.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, hello. I just wanted to ask, I know this is great, and sometimes we may be able to use this on our project and sometimes not. I just wanted to ask, for the project that I'm currently working on, whenever I need help or something, whom should I reach out to just to get some help when I'm stuck or couldn't figure out? Is there any Tableau help that I could get? Any help is really appreciated.
Yeah, I knew we could talk offline. We might have some
Okay,
ideas or some packages that might support you.
okay,
Yeah, we're happy to talk and look at maybe what that would look like for you.
okay. So sounds good. Whom should I reach out to?
You can reach out to me. Yeah, we can talk.
Your name is Chris, is it?
No, my name is Stuart. I'll put my email right
Okay,
here in the chat window.
okay. Sounds good. Thank
Yeah,
you so much.
Stuart, it's S. Tinsley at ZMatrix. Yeah, reach out. We'll have a conversation about it.
Yep. Thank you.
Thanks, Anu. Yeah, thanks
Yep.
everyone for hopping on. We'll see you in a month on the next Wednesday, and we'll have a new topic. Thank you, Lauren.
Yeah, thank you.